Hello, and welcome to my demonstration of the Logan String Melody 2. Recently, I was approached by a fellow member of a forum that I frequent, and somehow he'd been informed that I was a bit of an authority in the subject. Now, this is far from the truth, unfortunately, but at the same time, I felt this would be a good opportunity to put together a thorough audio and video demonstration of the instrument itself. Because from what I've seen on the internet at the moment, there doesn't seem to be a lot of background information regarding this particular instrument, and some people out there might find this beneficial or at least interesting. This demonstration should also help provide some insight into the world of string machines in general, as the string melody is a classic example of one. So this is going to include a bit of history about the instrument itself, explanations of all the functions and features that the actual keyboard has, and also some audio examples so that you can hear it in full action. Now, before I begin, I'm just going to say I'm not the world's greatest player, far from it, so bear with me in that. And also, for those of you interested in how this is actually being recorded, it's being plugged directly into a Focusrite Octoprix LE, which is then being fed into a DigiDesign Digi002 rack, which is obviously running Pro Tools on a computer. No external processing, no effects, no reverb, delay, just completely dry, unless otherwise stated. Now, before we begin, I'm going to cite a couple of references that I've used for the purpose of this demonstration. Now, the first here is a fantastic little book by Peter Forrest. It is called The A to Z of Analog Synthesizers, and it's part 1, which covers A to M. And this has some background information about the Logan String Melody and some other string machines that are that it can be compared with that were released sort of around the same time. And I also happen to have a review back when the Logan String Machine was actually released. It is from International Musician and Recording World, December 1977, so I'm told, and it obviously will give an insight as to what the perception of the instrument is when it was released. So without further ado, let's start off with some history of the instrument itself. So the first question to answer would probably be who are or were Logan? Now, according to Mr. Forrest's book here, they were originally an organ firm based like most of the other Italian firms on the Adriatic coast. I think that's how you say it. Why the Scottish sounding name? Well, I don't know, you tell me. Apparently it's log from logic and an from analog. He then goes on to say, Logan UK set up in 1978, presumably purely as distributors, not manufacturers. So there you have it. Now, according to this, the Logan String Melody was released in 1973 and was produced until 1976. The original retail price was £499, which was then discounted to £450 in 1976. So what is a string machine or string synthesizer? Well, basically it's a very limited analog synthesizer that works on the principle of having 12 master oscillators, one for each note in an octave. And these master oscillators are then divided down to provide all the other notes of the keyboard. So strictly speaking, there are only 12 tone sources which are then reused and reused to provide all the notes on the keyboard so that you can play polyphonically. And the other thing as well is, because of this, the keyboards are often, although not in all cases, fully polyphonic, so you could play as many notes as you want. Now, there are some other examples of string machines from the period. The most famous would probably be the ARP Selena, but they also have others such as the Krummer Multiman Performer, the Freeman String Synthesizer, the Roland RS series, the Polymoog in a sense is also one, and they all basically work on this principle. Now, the keyboards themselves were mainly designed to imitate instruments of the orchestra. In many cases, this was strings, but also sometimes brass and maybe even woodwind, and some even had piano and harpsichord presets. Now, some of these instruments were fully polyphonic, as I said, with each note having its own volume envelope so that you could articulate each key. Some were paraphonic, where you would either have single note triggering, where you'd press a key and it would follow the envelope, and any other keys would just be at the same volume as the first key, or multi-triggering, where wherever you would play a new key, the envelope would re-trigger and you'd get more articulation. And some of them also had filters and other ones didn't. In this case, the Logan String Melody is fully polyphonic polyphonic. Each key has its own VCA, so it's got volume articulation. There is no filter to be found on it at all. And finally, many string machines had a specific type of chorus circuit, which is usually called an ensemble chorus, and this is because the basic sound of the string machine itself is rather basic. It's usually only one oscillator per voice, so it's quite static sounding, there's not a lot of motion, and this effect basically is more than one chorus at the same time. Usually a chorus circuit has a delay line and then it modulates it, so you've got the original signal and one that's slightly delayed and also modulated in pitch, very subtly. Many of the stringers' chorus circuits actually have more than one chorus line, so you actually have the signal delayed and modulated maybe, 2, 3, 4 times, and each one is slightly different. So this helps simulate the inconsistencies of, say, 3 or 4 string players all playing in unison, and also helps give the string machine its distinctive sound that everyone associates it with. Now, over the years, the sound of the string machine has become fairly desirable, a bit like the mellotron, and some companies have even produced software instruments to try and cater for this need. One that particularly comes to mind is VSM, or Virtual String Machine, by G4 Software, that includes a selection of samples from various string machines, the Logan String Melody included. Now, we'll start by breaking the keyboard down into its different sections, and I think I'll begin by going from left to right. Now, the Logan String Melody's 5-octave keyboard is actually split into 2 halves, denoted by a little white sort of diamond shape right in the middle here. I think it's middle C actually. And obviously the half in the left is referred to as the bass, and the half in the right is referred to as the treble. Now, I've got a very basic sound set up here, but I'm going to go through the controls one by one to give you an idea of what they do. Now, the funny thing about the Logan String Melody, or at least mine, is that the sliders, they're kind of wired backwards. When you push something up, it decreases in volume, and when you pull it down, it goes up in volume. So when you have all the sliders set to their minimum settings, that's actually full value, if you want to call it that, which is kind of silly, but you get used to it, I guess. Anyway, the first slider on the left, it's in the bass section, is called percussion, or well, actually perk, yeah, and it's obviously for percussion. Now, this is it by itself. As you can hear, it's sort of a very bassy, decaying square wave. Now, this part itself is actually only monophonic, and I think it's low note priority, so the lowest key you play will introduce the percussion, which gives it basically a sort of percussive thump to give it a bit of oomph more than anything else, I'd think. Now, the next slider is labelled bass, and it is basically an octave lower than any of the other sliders. So when you play this, as you can hear, it's quite a deep sound, and that is basically a little. Those 2 sliders there are in a little section to themselves, right? Now, moving on, the next 3 sliders are titled cello, violin, and viola. Now, basically, these are all the same sounds, but in different octaves. So I'll begin by bringing in the cello. So here it is. Now the viola. Oh, dirty pot there. And now the violin. Now, these 3 sliders only control the left half of the keyboard. There are another 3 sliders for the treble half, and again, we'll just go for that. So here is the cello on the upper half. And here's the viola. And here's the violin. And that's almost the top of the keyboard there.